renowned speaker, Mary Noel Pepys. I'm attending this ABA conference because of my own involvement with the Central Eastern European Law Initiative, known as CELI. It was through CELI that I came to know Mary Noel. CELI was formed to help the newly emerging nation states in Central and Eastern Europe develop constitutions, laws, and institutions to help them function in democratic societies and with free market economies. And this all came about with the breakup of the Soviet Union about 8 years ago. CELI uses volunteers, attorneys, judges, and legal academics. Mary Noel got her law degree at Hastings here in San Francisco. She worked at the California Supreme Court and at the California Court of Appeals as an attorney. She worked as legal counsel for the United States House of Representatives Committee on Banking. And then she spent a year at the State Department of the United States with Ambassador Dan Terra, whom perhaps some of you knew. After that, she spent 2 years negotiating the multinational force and observers agreements with France, Italy, and a number of other nations to monitor security arrangements set out in the Egypt-Israeli peace treaty. In 1984, Mary Noel abandoned that international work and came back to San Francisco, joined a San Francisco law firm, and later opened her own law office in this city, specializing in land use law. She then had a hankering to go back to some of the work that she had enjoyed overseas. And she agreed to serve as a CELI liaison to Bulgaria. I saw her there and was privileged to meet a number of Bulgarian judges, many of them women, who had fallen under Mary Noel's spell. She persuaded them to form a judicial education and training center that has been so successful that it's trying to persuade some of its neighboring countries to follow their example in Bulgaria. CELI persuaded Mary Noel to extend her service for an additional 2 years to continue her efforts toward building judicial independence and education and training for nations in that entire region. She's been an exceedingly successful motivator of people, even in cultures far removed from her own. She has provided help in Albania, Armenia, Bosnia, Croatia, Lithuania, Macedonia, Moldova, Poland, Slovakia, and Ukraine, among other places. She represents, I think, the very best we have in the American legal tradition. She has that spirit of volunteerism that I think sets us apart. And she is going to be able to look back in her life and know that the work she has done has made a difference in the world. And I'm just delighted to be able to summon Mary Noel Pepys to the podium now to share with us a few of her experiences on her travels around the globe. Mary Noel.
It's an honor, Your Honor, to be introduced by Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. Now, why would an attorney from San Francisco give up the comforts of home, a wonderful apartment with a spectacular view of the bay, an office on one of San Francisco's piers, to live and work in Eastern Europe and not get paid? As a CELI liaison for the past 3 years, I would like to take you on a journey that will give you the answer. Imagine what it must feel like to leave your family and friends behind, and after months of preparation, you embark on an unknown venture with the idealistic fervor of a 1960s Peace Corps volunteer. It is exactly how I approached my assignment with Sealy when I went to Bulgaria in October of 1993. I arrived in Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, with my 5 pieces of luggage which were to last 1 year, hopes and expectations. But all I saw were gray skies, dull and dilapidated buildings, potholes large enough to sink trucks, and horrific emissions from buses and factories. I was shown my state-assigned apartment. It was built under communism. It had only the bare essentials, and it was very ugly. And I became depressed, and I thought, why did I make this decision? But I went the next day down to downtown Sofia, and I walked around the town. Now, I knew I could not speak the language, nor could I understand Bulgarian. But I had no idea how disconcerting it would be not to be able to read the street signs, read a menu, read a map, because the Bulgarian alphabet is Cyrillic, like the Russian alphabet. So I walked aimlessly around the town, didn't know how to ask people where I was, or in fact where I was going. But I walked and looked around Sofia, and then I decided to take the bus back to my apartment, the same bus I took into the city. I get on the bus, and we start traveling towards my apartment. And I'm stunned, because there are hundreds of apartment buildings just like mine. This is what they did under communism. There was such thing as being aesthetic. They just had to construct building after building after building. I went block after block after block on the bus, and I didn't know where to get off because I didn't know where my apartment was. Well, hours later, and I mean hours later, I finally find my apartment. So I'm now in Sofia for about a month. Winter sets in. The temperature dips into the 40s. There's no heat in my apartment, and the hot water's been turned off. Well, I've become accustomed to wearing a wool coat and heavy socks and a knit cap to bed before the heat is turned on. Now, why did it take so long? Because in Bulgaria, like most of its former communist neighbors, the heating is central. No, not central to my apartment, central to the city. The heating is turned on when city bureaucrats decide to turn it on, and not a minute before. And once they turn it on, it is kept on 24 hours a day until spring. The only way I could regulate the temperature in my apartment was to open the windows and doors, even during snowstorms. And I'm not getting paid for this. If it sounds intolerable to you, it was for me in the beginning. But I didn't become a Sealy liaison for the comforts of home, otherwise I would have never left. I became a Sealy liaison because I wanted to be where the political action is. I wanted to live in a society where people over the past 40 years in Central and Eastern Europe and over the past 70 years in the former Soviet Union had been told that the supremacy of the state was the way that the political structure should be. And then seemingly overnight, the sermon was changed to extol the virtues of individual freedoms. I wanted to understand how people so accustomed to state guarantees of food, housing, employment, medical care, even vacations, could suddenly assume the burdens of freedom, taking responsibility for their own lives. Never did any of us in this room think we would see the demise of communism during our life. This is an opportunity, indeed a challenge of a lifetime, I thought, to participate in the birthing process of democracy. Sealy began shortly after the demise of communism. Scenes of the Berlin Wall crumbling gave hope to people around the world that democracies and market-based economies would emerge in these former communist countries. The citizens of these countries were euphoric and eager to forge ahead in writing new constitutions and a host of laws which would embrace private commerce and democratic principles. The ABA and some of its visionaries created the Sealy Project in 1991 and began sending experienced attorneys to live and work long-term in these countries because the ABA decided that having a presence in these countries full-time would really help the people of the country enhance their judicial independence, improve and develop their bar associations, and to help with developing their law school curriculum. So let's get back to Bulgaria. I've now been there for about 3 to 4 months, and after meeting extraordinary people, and by the way, Bulgarians are some of the most intelligent people I've ever met. And also one thing I learned from traveling all throughout Central and Eastern Europe, that as much as we have negative to say about communism, it provided an excellent educational system. Many of these people are far more educated than they appear because we tend to look at and judge Central and Eastern Europeans and those who live in the former Soviet Union by the infrastructure. But really we should take a look at what they say because they are so highly educated. And what I learned from being in Bulgaria is we don't need to teach them about democracy. They know about democracy. We need to help them implement democracy. They need the resources, the technical resources, and the financial resources. So I did meet many, many extraordinary people, but as Justice O'Connor said, I came across 4 judges, all women, and the 5 of us decided to create a legal training center. Well, we were ultimately successful having worked around the clock, but it was only after we received visits by 2 Supreme Court justices. The first one was Justice O'Connor in July of 1994. She came to Bulgaria as part of the Sealy Executive Board meeting and had the opportunity to meet these 4 judges as well as many other judges in the country. And it was through her words of wisdom that these judges were inspired to pursue the development of this legal training center. And then a couple months later, I heard from the U.S. Ambassador to Bulgaria that the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court may be visiting Sofia. So I said to the ambassador, well, then he's got to come to Varna, Bulgaria, which is on the Black Sea, about an hour's flight from Sofia, because this will be the future headquarters of this legal training center. And the ambassador rolled his eyes and said, Mary Noel, you'll never get the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court to come to Varna. And I said, yes, I will. And you know why? I knew he would come because, although I don't know the Chief Justice, or didn't at that time, he's American. And Americans love to help people, particularly those who are involved in former communist countries wanting to create a democratic society. So I wrote the Chief Justice a letter. Sealy in Washington helped, as well as the U.S. State Department. And sure enough, the Chief Justice came to Sofia and then he flew out to Varna. I'll never forget how stunned these judges were that the most senior judge in the United States of America would be interested in their struggle for judicial independence. Now, this Legal Training Center is one of many projects I worked on, and actually I'd love to tell you about many of the others, but I only have 15 minutes to cover 3 years, so I'm going to move on to another country. But let me just say, when I left Bulgaria, I left Sealy. I went back to San Francisco and decided I would resume my law practice. So I came back to that lovely apartment with a glorious view. I met all my friends. I've lived in California all my life, so I have many friends that I saw. I went to wonderful restaurants in San Francisco, and if you've been here long enough, I'm sure you've been to some of them, or you will be going. And then I have friends who have these glorious homes in Napa, the wine country, and got to play a lot of tennis and go swimming. And my life felt empty. I really miss Sealy. I miss the extraordinary people I was working with, and I wanted to go back. I wanted to go back to Eastern Europe. So I called up Sealy and said, I want to re-up. And Mark Ellis, the director of Sealy, and I decided that I would go to Latvia because I had worked so well with the judges in Bulgaria, we thought I would try to do the same in Latvia. Now, Latvia is interesting. It's one of the 3 Baltic states. It's in the northern part of the continent. And if you ever have a chance to go to these Baltic states, Estonia and Lithuania being the other 2, I would encourage you to go because the capitals of each of these cities emerged unscathed from several wars, including even World War II. And they're glorious cities. You'll have buildings dating back to the 12th century lining the cobblestone streets. So please put that on your itinerary in the next couple of years if you can. Now, for me, Latvia was also interesting because it's an entirely different history, different culture, and of course a different language. I had many memorable events, but one also took place in Latvia after I first got there. I tried to learn the Latvian language and was butchering it when I was speaking to one of my colleagues. And while I was trying to speak it, she had tears rolling down her face. And I was so stunned. And she told me that she was so honored I was trying to speak her language. Because you see, Russia occupied Latvia, and during the Soviet occupation, the Russians required that everyone within the former Soviet Union speak Russian. They could not speak their mother tongue. In fact, there are many Russians living in Latvia today who have lived there for the past 40 to 50 years who can't speak a word of Latvian. So she was so proud and honored that an American would come and try and learn her language. I worked with her and with many of the judges in Latvia, and we also in Latvia created a judicial training center, which today can boast tremendous success because it is an essential institution in Latvia, providing education and training to all judges. Now, I want to explain why Celia and I have concentrated on judicial reform. Under communism, judges were essentially puppets of the state. In fact, many of their decisions were governed by a Communist Party official. Many judges had to be members of the Communist Party. So today, judges must overcome their poor public image. They must overcome that historical perspective that people have about the judiciary. They have abominable working conditions and low wages. In fact, most judges make only a couple $100s a month. They work in offices with 2 or 3 other judges, and their only piece of equipment is a manual typewriter. Laws and amendments to laws are not systematically distributed to the judiciary. Consequently, there are judges who make uninformed decisions today. In some countries, judges actually have to go to the local newsstand to buy the law or an amendment to the law. When I was in Latvia, I went to one of the judges' chambers and we were discussing a criminal law issue, and he brought out his criminal code. In his code, he had pasted the newspaper version of the amendments to the code. His code looked more like an accordion than a legal text. And he could not even assure me it was up to date, but it's all he had. I think you'll be interested to know that many of the judges in this part of the world are women, and most of them are young, in their 20s and 30s. This is because Central and Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union had a judicial system similar to Western Europe, where lawyers just out of law school are eligible to become judges. I have, again, more I'd love to say about Latvia, but I'll just say one other thing about Latvia, because people have asked, what are your more memorable experiences? Well, one I had was working with the chairman of the Latvian Supreme Court and the president of the Latvian Judicial Training Center. Unfortunately, judges in this part of the world must fundraise. The government does not have enough money for these judicial training centers or judges associations, so the judges must raise the money themselves. And the best source is through foreign organizations like CELI, other Western European organizations, and embassies. So I took these 2 gentlemen and told them we must fundraise for the Latvian Judicial Training Center. We must go to different embassies and meet with the ambassadors. Well, Latvians are very passive and very shy, and on top of their cultural behavior, also communism taught people not to boast about themselves. And therefore it was very difficult for them to go to different embassies and talk to an ambassador and tell the ambassador they needed some money and could you please help. So I literally spent weeks with these 2 very senior and very intelligent men, coaxing them on how to meet their first ambassador. And they were very nervous our first trip in. But we saw an ambassador to one country, and I said what I had to say, and then they gave their own talk. And after they finished, the ambassador said, "This sounds very interesting, and I'd like to give you $10,000. We left the embassy, and these men changed. They couldn't wait till our next appointment. and you know, it really was one of the best moments because I saw before my eyes a radical change in attitude. These men will never be the same. They'll now be able to, as they must, fight for their own independence. They have to take the initiative. They can't let anyone else, because in Central and Eastern Europe, as in the United States, judicial independence isn't given. It's not guaranteed that it's going to be implemented. It's up to the judges. And I saw this change in these judges. Well, Sealy then, after they finished the year in Latvia, asked if I would extend one more year and work regionally, work all throughout Central and Eastern Europe. So I moved to Bratislava, Slovakia. And we thought that would be a good base because Bratislava is 45 minutes away from Vienna. And if I ever wanted a Western fix, I would just get on the train and go into Vienna for the day. In fact, I remember not too long ago, Justice Clark of the California Supreme Court and his wife called me and said they're in Vienna. Would I like to have lunch? So I went to the office early in the morning, took the 10:20 train to Vienna, had lunch with them. And by the way, we had lunch at Dough & Co. It's the hottest restaurant in Vienna. It has a great view of St. Stephen's. I'm serious. If you're going to Vienna, Dough & Co. D-O & Co. And we had a great lunch. And I toured Vienna. I took the 4 o'clock train back to Bratislava in my office by 5. So, Justice O'Connor, I did play hooky a couple times while I was there. But what was so wonderful for me in this 3rd year is I got to fill my appointment calendar with appointments with judges, as Justice O'Connor said, in Bosnia, Armenia, Albania, Moldova, Macedonia, Romania, Poland, Ukraine. It was glorious. And it takes a lot of effort because each country is vastly different. So often I would approach a new country with a blank slate and let the judges tell me what they wanted. I could respond to how they treat issues. And every single country is so different that it was a lot of work, but extremely enjoyable. And I would say, having been doing this work for 3 years, one of my greatest achievements is the fact that now I am working with judges, and rather than bringing judges from the United States or from Western Europe, which is what we used to do in our workshops, I am using the judges with whom I've been working for the past 3 years to be the experts for judges from other countries that had similar histories. And that's a real tribute, because that's a legacy that Sealy is now leaving in these countries. So my 3rd year has just come to an end, and I'm back in my apartment with that glorious view, and I'm very happy to be back in San Francisco. But as I think about the past 3 years, I think that they were some of the 3 greatest years of my life. And what was intolerable for me in the beginning simply became inconveniences. But the joy of making a difference and making friends in former communist countries has not only been exciting and challenging, but supremely satisfying. Thank you.
Wow, she needs another career. Recommend something media related. I mean, just no. Oh, amazing. We thank you so much. You just literally blew us away, and here is a gift to you from us. So, I like that gift. Thank you. Thank you so much. We have a couple of minutes, and I didn't ask Mary Noel's permission, but I bet she'd do this. Would you take a question or two?
Sure.
Take a question or two. A couple of people said they wanted to. Anybody that has a question, now's your time.
You have to come up here, though, if you ask a question.
Well, I want to ask, what do you see as the greatest need, Mary Noel, now, in terms of the kind of help that our liaisons can give? What should we be doing, as you see it?
Our emphasis is shifting actually regionally. We have been in Central and Eastern Europe since 1991, and I think we have actually accomplished quite a bit. Sealy has done a tremendous job, and I want you to know this is the only organization, I'm going to get to your the answer, Justice O'Connor, but this is the only organization that sends volunteers to Central and Eastern Europe. There is not one other organization around the world that has volunteers. I would think lawyers from France, Italy, Germany should be interested in the future of their neighboring countries, but it's only the U.S. So we're the ones who started in Central and Eastern Europe. And as I say, I think our emphasis now is shifting eastward. We have really accomplished quite a bit in Central and Eastern Europe, and now we're going to focus on the former Soviet Union, the 15 republics of the former Soviet Union. And I would say really doing the same kind of work we've been doing, but just shifting our attention to the republics of the Soviet Union. That is to help enhance judicial independence, develop bar associations. You've got to realize that in most of these countries, bar associations did exist until the mid-1940s, and then they were forced to disband. And not until just the early 90s were most of these bar associations reconstituted. In fact, in Bulgaria, the bar association there just printed a newsletter, and they didn't even have enough money to send it to all members of the bar. They send it just to the local offices around the country. So there's a lot of work to do with bar associations. And then, of course, the law schools, the curriculum has to be improved because laws have changed dramatically since 1991 in these countries, and the curricula has to reflect the new laws. The future? I don't know, though. Well, I don't know the future, but I have agreed to extend one more year. See, we can't get rid of me. But this year, if it's approved, Sealy and I are working on this, I will be the regional judicial specialist for the former Soviet Union, as I was for Central and Eastern Europe, so I'll be flying to countries like Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan and Azerbaijan. So, and I'm looking forward to it. If it takes place, I'll be leaving in about a month.
Is Sealy actively recruiting lawyers for these positions?
Yeah, absolutely. Sealy is actively recruiting lawyers. You have to have had 5 years experience. You have to have...
You have to speak the language.
No, you don't have to speak the language at all. In fact, in all these countries, we have excellent translators, usually law students or lawyers, who probably speak English much better than we do. And they are our translators in all our meetings, so you don't need to speak the language. You have to be very flexible. So, and you have to be courageous sometimes.